The words didn't come out loud. They didn't need to. They cut through the room anyway. Sharp, clean, final, and then, "He's not my grandson." Let me ask you something. What would you do if someone said that about your little brother? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Not behind his back, not in private, but right there, at the dinner table, in front of everyone, because that's exactly where I was. It was supposed to be a normal night, or at least as normal as things ever got when Grandpa Victor was around. My name is Lena Carter. I'm 25, and if there's one thing I've learned about family, it's that silence usually means something is wrong. And that night, the silence was deafening. The dining room looked perfect. Too perfect. Warm lights, polished table, plates aligned like we were in some kind of magazine photo. My mom had spent all day cooking. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic. Everything smelled good. Everything looked good. But something felt off. You ever walk into a room and feel like something already happened before you got there? That was me, standing in the doorway, watching everyone settle in. At the head of the table sat Victor Hale, my grandfather. 68 years old, perfect posture, cold eyes that missed nothing. Next to him, my Uncle Ryan, barely looking up from his phone. His wife, Clara, quiet, polite, the kind of person who notices everything but says nothing. Across from me sat my little brother, Eli, 8 years old, small, quiet. The kind of kid who smiles like he's asking permission. He was excited. You could tell. He kept glancing around like he was finally part of something important. And honestly, that made it worse. My mom, Mara, was different that night. Too careful. Every movement felt rehearsed. Every word measured. And my dad, Daniel, he barely spoke at all, just sat there, watching, waiting. For what? I didn't know yet. Dinner started quietly. Forks scraping, glasses clinking, small talk that didn't go anywhere. No one laughed, no one relaxed. And then Eli reached for the chicken. Just a simple movement. A kid serving himself food. Normal, right? Except that's when it happened. He doesn't eat with us. Victor didn't raise his voice, didn't slam the table. He just said it, like it was a rule, like it had always been a rule. Eli froze. His hand stopped midair, unlike someone had pressed pause on him. He didn't even look up at first, like maybe, if he stayed still enough, this wouldn't be real. No one spoke, not my uncle, not Clara, not even my mom. And then Victor added, slowly, clearly, so there was no misunderstanding. "He's not my grandson." I felt it in my chest, that sharp, hot feeling, anger, confusion, something else I couldn't name yet. I looked at my mom. Her hand tightened around her glass. But she didn't say anything. Not really, just a quiet, "Dad, please." Please what? Stop? Explain? Take it back? He did none of those. And my dad? That's when I noticed him. Really noticed him. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't confused. He was still. Too still, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Eli slowly pulled his hand back, didn't say a word, didn't cry. And somehow, that made it worse. Because you could see it, that tiny moment where something inside him just shut down. I wanted to say something. I should have said something, but I didn't, because I was watching my dad. And something was changing. He looked at Eli, then at Victor, then at my mom, and finally, he pushed his chair back, slowly. The sound dragged across the floor like a warning. He stood up, and the entire room shifted. You could feel it. Whatever was about to happen, this wasn't just an argument. This was something bigger, something that had been buried for a long time. My heart started pounding, because I realized something in that moment. This wasn't the beginning of the problem. This was the moment it finally broke. And then my dad opened his mouth and said, "You're right." Wait, what? And that's when I knew this night wasn't going to end the way I thought. Not even close. Let that sink in for a second. Because that's what my dad said. Not stop. Not that's enough. Not even, "You're wrong." He agreed. So let me ask you, what kind of father agrees with someone who just humiliated his own son? The room didn't move. It couldn't. It was like everything. Every person, every breath got stuck between those two words. You're right. I felt my stomach drop. I turned to look at Eli. He didn't understand what was happening. Of course he didn't. He was 8. All he knew was that he'd reached for food, and suddenly he didn't belong at the table anymore. But here's the thing. This didn't come out of nowhere. And I think, deep down, I already knew that. If I'm being honest, Grandpa Victor had never really treated Eli like the rest of us. At first, I thought it was just favoritism. You know how some grandparents are. They connect more with one kid than another. With me, he'd ask about school. He'd bring me books. Sometimes money in an envelope. With Eli, nothing. No birthday calls, no gifts, no, how are you? Just absence. And when he did acknowledge Eli, it was always indirect. Like he couldn't even bring himself to say his name. That boy, your son, never Eli. I noticed it. I just didn't question it, because no one else did. But now it all felt different. He wasn't ignoring Eli anymore. He was rejecting him, openly, publicly. And somehow, no one seemed surprised enough. I looked at my mom again. She looked like she was about to fall apart. But she still wasn't stopping it. Why? Why wasn't she saying something? And then it hit me. This wasn't new to her. This wasn't even new to my dad. They'd been here before, just not like this, not out loud. A memory flashed in my head. A few months ago, late at night, I'd gone downstairs to get water, and I heard voices in the kitchen, sharp, low, urgent. Grandpa Victor. You think I don't know? My mom. Please don't do this. My dad. It doesn't matter anymore. I didn't understand it back then. I thought it was just another adult argument. Something complicated and boring. Something that had nothing to do with me. But standing there now, watching Eli sit frozen in his chair, I realized it had everything to do with us. Back at the table, Victor leaned back slightly, and like he'd been waiting for this moment, like everything was finally going according to plan. And then he said something that made my chest tighten. This should have been addressed years ago. Years ago? What does that even mean? What had been addressed? And why now? Why here? My dad didn't sit back down. He stayed standing. Calm, controlled, too controlled. And then he said it again, slower this time. You're right. My mom shook her head immediately. Daniel, don't. Her voice cracked. Not loud, but enough? Don't what? Tell the truth? Expose something? End whatever this is? I looked at Eli again. He was staring at his plate now, not touching anything, not even moving, like if he stayed quiet enough, maybe everyone would forget he was there. That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't fully understand what was happening yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever this was, it was about him, and he didn't deserve it. Victor leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on my dad, waiting, pushing, almost enjoying it. And then my dad did something that made everything worse, or maybe made everything clearer. He looked directly at Eli, then at me, and then back at Victor, and he said, He's right about one thing. No, what are you doing? My heart started racing, because now it didn't feel like a defense. It felt like confirmation. My mom stood up suddenly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. Stop it! But my dad didn't stop. He took a breath and said the words that changed everything. He's not your grandson. The room went completely still. Even the air felt heavier. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Because then he added, quietly, clearly, with no hesitation. And there's a reason for that. What reason? That's when I realized we weren't even close to the truth yet. And just when you think that's the worst thing that could be said, my dad kept going. Let me ask you something. What's worse? Hearing something cruel or realizing it might actually be true? The silence after that sentence? It wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that presses on your ears, the kind that makes your heart beat louder than anything else in the room. My mom stood frozen, her hands slightly raised like she could still stop this, like she was just 1 second too late. Daniel, don't do this, she said again. But this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like fear. My dad didn't even look at her. He was focused on Eli, then on me, and finally, on Victor. He's right about one thing, my dad repeated, but not for the reason you think. What does that even mean? At this point, I wasn't just confused. I was scared. Because whatever this truth was, it had been buried for years. And now it was coming out all at once. My little brother shifted slightly in his chair. Finally, slowly, he looked up. Not at Grandpa, not at Mom, at Dad. Because even now, he trusted him. That's what made this unbearable. My dad's expression changed when he looked at Eli. It softened, just for a second. Like everything else in the room disappeared, and then he said it. Clear, steady, unshaken. He's not your grandson because he's not biologically mine. There it was. No buildup, no softening. Just the truth, dropped right in the middle of the table. I felt like the ground disappeared under me. What? My brain tried to catch up, tried to make sense of it, but it didn't fit. None of it fit. Eli isn't Dad's son? Then what does that make him? What does that make us? I turned to my mom, and I already knew, before she said anything, before she even moved. Her face had changed, completely. The control she'd been holding on to all night, gone. Tears filled her eyes. But she didn't deny it. She didn't argue. She didn't say, "That's not true." She just whispered, "I was going to tell them." Going to? When? After this? After years. Victor let out a quiet breath. Not relief, not anger, something colder. Satisfaction. Exactly, he said. And like he'd just been proven right in a debate no one else knew they were part of. I looked at Eli again. He didn't fully understand. Not the biology, not the implications. But he understood one thing. Something was wrong. And somehow, it was about him. Am I in trouble? He asked softly. That question, that broke something in me, because this wasn't about him. It was never about him. And yet, he was the one sitting there, shrinking into his chair, thinking he did something wrong. My dad moved instantly, pulled his chair back further, walked over, knelt beside him. "No," he said quietly, firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." That was the first moment all night that felt real. Not tense, not staged, just real. But it didn't stop what was happening, not even close, because now the truth was out. And once something like that comes out, there's no putting it back. I looked at my mom. Then whose? I couldn't even finish the question. Didn't need to. She closed her eyes, and that was enough. An affair. It had to be. There was no other explanation that made sense. Years ago. Hidden, buried, protected. And suddenly, everything clicked. The tension, the arguments. The way Dad always seemed distant sometimes. The way Mom was always trying too hard to keep things calm. This wasn't new. This was just the first time we were seeing it. Victor leaned forward again, resting his hands on the table, like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "This family," he said slowly, "is built on a lie." No one interrupted him. No one defended against it. Because now, it didn't sound like an accusation, and it sounded like a conclusion. But then, my dad stood up again, slowly, deliberately, and when he spoke this time, his voice was different, stronger, certain. "No," he said, and every eye turned to him. "It's built on a choice." That line hit harder than anything else, because suddenly, this wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about what happens next. And that's when everything truly started to break. Victor stood up, his chair scraping sharply behind him, eyes locked on my dad, and then he said the one thing that made it clear: there was no going back from this. "Then you can leave." Wait, what? All of you? The room froze again, but this time, it wasn't shock. It was realization. This wasn't just a reveal. This was a line being drawn, and the question was, who was going to cross it? No hesitation, no second thought, just a decision, cold and immediate. Let me ask you something. If your entire family came down to one moment, one choice, would you stay or would you walk away? The words hung in the air like something solid, heavy, unavoidable. Victor didn't sit back down. He didn't soften his tone. If anything, he looked more certain than ever. Like this exact moment, was what he had been waiting for all along. My dad didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't even look surprised. He just nodded. Once. "Then we will," he said, just like that. No drama, no hesitation. And somehow, that made it hit even harder. My heart started racing. Wait, we're actually leaving? Like, right now? I looked at my mom. She looked completely unprepared for this. "Daniel, wait," she said quickly, stepping forward. But he didn't move toward her. He turned instead, to Eli. Still kneeling beside him, he placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Come on," he said softly. Eli looked confused, still trying to process everything. "Are we in trouble?" he asked again, quieter this time. And again, that question landed like a weight on everyone in the room. My dad shook his head. "No, we're just going somewhere better." Somewhere better. Those words didn't sound angry. They didn't sound dramatic. They sounded decided. That's when I stood up. My chair scraped loudly across the floor, breaking whatever silence was left. "I'm coming too." No one asked me to. No one told me to. It just wasn't a question. Because at that moment, something became very clear to me. Family wasn't sitting at that table. Then family was standing up from it. My dad looked at me, just for a second, and nodded. That was enough. Behind me, I heard my mom's voice crack completely. "Please don't do this." But now, it sounded different. Not controlled, not careful, just broken. She stepped closer. "I made a mistake, okay? Years ago. We moved past it. We agreed." "We didn't move past it," my dad interrupted calmly. "We lived around it." That line hit harder than anything else she said, because you could see it. She knew he was right. Victor watched the entire exchange without interrupting, arms crossed now, satisfied, but also distant. Like, for him, this was already over. Ryan finally looked up from his phone, for the first time all night. "This is insane," he muttered. Clara leaned toward him, whispering something under her breath. But neither of them stood. Neither of them chose a side. And maybe that was their choice. My dad helped Eli out of his chair, small hand in his, tight, like he was afraid to let go. I grabbed my jacket without even thinking. Everything felt fast now, but also strangely calm, like the storm had already happened, and this was just what came after. We started toward the door, 3 of us, just like that. But right before we reached it, Victor spoke again. "Don't expect things to stay the same," he said. My dad didn't turn around, didn't slow down. "They already haven't," he replied. And that was it. The door opened, cold air rushed in, and just like that, we stepped out. But here's the thing. Walking out of that house, that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything that came next. Because the truth had finally been said. And now, there was no hiding from what it would cost. The door closed behind us with a dull, final sound. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. Let me ask you something. What happens after everything falls apart? Not in the moment, not during the shouting or the reveal or the walkout. But after, when it's quiet again, that's where the real story begins. We didn't go far that night, just a small motel off the highway. 1 room, 2 beds, a flickering lamp in the corner. It smelled faintly like detergent and something older underneath. But none of us complained. Eli sat on the edge of the bed, still holding onto my dad's hand. Like if he let go, something else might disappear too. I stood near the window, arms crossed, watching cars pass by. Everything felt unreal. I'm like we had just stepped out of one life and hadn't fully landed in the next one yet. Finally, Eli asked the question that had been building all night. "Are you still my dad?" The room went completely still. My dad didn't hesitate, didn't even pause. He crouched down in front of him, eye level, and said, "I chose to be." Simple, clear, No confusion. And somehow that answer did more than any explanation ever could. Eli nodded slowly, like he didn't fully understand the words, but he understood what they meant. And for the first time that night, he smiled. Just a little. But it was real. That was the emotional shift. The moment everything stopped feeling like it was breaking and started feeling like it might still hold together. But reality? It didn't wait. The next few weeks were messy, not complicated in ways I didn't even know families could be. My dad filed for separation. There was no big fight left between him and my mom. No screaming, no dramatic confrontations. Just distance. Final and quiet. And then came the question no one wanted to say out loud. Eli. Legally, things weren't simple. My dad wasn't his biological father, which meant, on paper, he had no automatic rights. But life isn't just paper. There were records, school forms, medical history, years of proof that my dad had been there for everything. Every birthday, every doctor visit, every bedtime story. When it went to court, it wasn't about biology anymore. It was about reality. And the reality was this. My dad had raised Eli from day one. The decision didn't happen overnight. There were interviews, evaluations, questions that felt way too big for an 8-year-old to answer. But in the end, the court recognized what had always been true. My dad remained Eli's legal guardian, not because of blood, but because of choice, consistency, presence. That mattered. Back at my mom's house, things didn't settle as easily. Grandpa Victor, he stood by what he said, didn't apologize, didn't reach out. But something unexpected happened. Not everyone agreed with him. Extended families started to hear about what happened, and the reactions? They were divided. Some sided with Victor, saying truth is truth, that blood matters. But others? They didn't see it that way. They saw a man who waited years just to expose a child at a dinner table. Ryan stopped visiting as often. Clara kept her distance completely. Even within that house. The cracks started to show. And my mom? She tried, she called, texted, asked to meet. Sometimes my dad responded. Most of the time, he didn't, not out of anger, but because something had shifted too far to go back. As for me, I didn't know where I stood at first. I was angry, confused, not just at my mom, but at everything. At the years of silence, at the lie, at the fact that my little brother had to sit there and feel like he didn't belong. But over time, something became clear. None of that changed who Eli was. And it didn't change who my dad was either. Months passed. We moved into a small house. Nothing fancy. But it felt lighter. No tension at dinner. No unspoken rules. No waiting for something to go wrong. Just normal. For the first time in a long time. One evening, I stood in the hallway watching them. Eli laughing. My dad helping him with homework. And it hit me. That night didn't destroy our family. It revealed it. Not the version that sat around that polished table. Not the one that pretended everything was fine. The real one. The one that chose each other, even when it would have been easier not to. And yeah, we lost people along the way. But what stayed? That mattered more. Because in the end, it wasn't about who was related by blood. It was about who stayed, who stood up, who walked out and didn't let go. And that was something no one at that table could take away.